It's 2007. You're the undisputed king of mobile phones. You control 50% of the global smartphone market. You're selling 435 million phones a year. You're so dominant that you account for 4% of your entire country's GDP. Then some guy at Apple walks on stage with a phone that has no buttons. You laugh. You call it a toy. You dismiss it completely. 6 years later, your market share collapses from 50% to 3%. You sell your entire company for $7.2 billion to Microsoft. They write off the entire purchase as a loss. Your empire? Gone. Your brand? Worthless. Your legacy? A cautionary tale. This is the story of Nokia, the mobile phone giant that seemed invincible and then vanished in the blink of an eye. Let's rewind to the late 1990s and early 2000s. Nokia isn't just winning the mobile phone game, they are the game. Remember that iconic Nokia 3310? The phone you could drop down a flight of stairs, throw against a wall, run over with a car, and it would still work perfectly? That wasn't just a phone. That was a cultural phenomenon. Everyone had one. Your parents had one. Your friends had one. That kid in class playing Snake during lunch? Nokia 3310. Nokia wasn't just making phones. They were making legendary, indestructible devices that people actually trusted with their lives. While competitors fumbled with fragile designs and terrible battery life, Nokia pumped out phones that lasted for days on a single charge and could survive anything. The Nokia ringtone became one of the most recognized sounds on Earth, more recognizable than most national anthems. When you heard that tune, you knew exactly what it was. By the early 2000s, Nokia had become unstoppable. They were the Apple of their era, the Samsung before Samsung existed, the undisputed heavyweight champion of mobile phones. In Finland, Nokia's home country, the company was so massive it accounted for 4% of the nation's entire GDP. 4%. One company. 21% of Finland's total exports came from Nokia. 70% of the Helsinki Stock Exchange's market value was Nokia. The company wasn't just successful, it was the backbone of an entire national economy. By 2007, Nokia hit their absolute peak. They controlled 37.8% of the global mobile phone market, reaching 40% in the fourth quarter alone. They sold 435 million handsets that year. To put that in perspective, that's more phones than the entire population of North America. But here's where it gets even more impressive. In the smartphone market specifically, Nokia was completely dominant. In quarter 2, 2007, Nokia held 50.8% of the global smartphone market share. Think about that. 1 out of every 2 smartphones sold on planet Earth was a Nokia. They were printing money. Their profits were astronomical. Their brand was beloved worldwide. From businessmen in New York to farmers in rural India, everyone knew Nokia. Everyone trusted Nokia. Nokia seemed invincible, untouchable, eternal. And then came January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walks onto the stage at the Macworld conference in San Francisco. He's wearing his signature black turtleneck and jeans. He's got that cocky, self-assured smile. Today, he begins, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products. The crowd waits. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. He pauses for a dramatic effect. An iPod, a phone, an internet communicator. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. The audience loses their minds. Tech journalists sprint to their keyboards. The world watches in absolute awe. Meanwhile, at Nokia headquarters in Espoo, Finland, executives are watching this presentation, and they're laughing. Are you serious? A phone with no physical keyboard? A touchscreen you have to tap with your greasy fingers? No removable battery? No memory card slot? This thing costs $499, and you can't even change the battery? Nokia's internal analysis of the iPhone was brutally dismissive. Too expensive. Too fragile. Terrible battery life, no business features. You can't even send MMS messages. No 3G connectivity, no copy and paste. The conclusion from Nokia's leadership was clear. The iPhone is a niche product for Apple fanboys and tech geeks. It'll capture maybe 2 to 3% of the market at most. It poses zero threat to Nokia's dominance. This arrogance would prove absolutely fatal. One Nokia engineer who saw the iPhone later said, "We laughed. We all laughed. Because it didn't have a keyboard. We were so convinced that physical keyboards were what customers wanted." But while Nokia was laughing, Apple was busy rewriting every single rule of what a mobile phone could be. The iPhone wasn't just a phone. It was a pocket computer, a gaming device, a music player, an actual web browser that worked properly, a camera that didn't suck, an app platform that would change everything. And people, they went absolutely insane for it. The iPhone sold 1.4 million units in its first 90 days. Critics said it would flop. It didn't flop. It ignited a revolution. But But Nokia still wasn't worried. 1.4 million? Nokia sold 435 million phones that year. The iPhone was a rounding error, except it wasn't. Here's what Nokia didn't understand. The iPhone wasn't competing for Nokia's customers. It was creating an entirely new category. In 2008, Nokia's mobile phone market share actually peaked at 38.6%. They were still the biggest, still dominant. But something had fundamentally shifted. Apple launched the App Store in July 2008. Within months, it had thousands of applications. Games, productivity tools, social media apps, everything imaginable. Nokia's Symbian operating system? It was a nightmare to develop for. Complex, outdated, frustrating. Developers hated it. Google saw what Apple was doing and launched Android. Suddenly, multiple manufacturers could offer iPhone-like experiences at different price points. Nokia's leadership faced a critical decision: abandon Symbian and switch to Android, or double down on their own platform. They chose wrong, catastrophically wrong. Instead of admitting Symbian was outdated, Nokia spent hundreds of millions trying to improve it. They reorganized, they restructured, they renamed things. But Symbian was fundamentally broken, built for a different era of mobile computing. Meanwhile, their market share started bleeding. Not collapsing yet, just bleeding. 48.7% in Q3 2007, down to 41% in Q4 2008, then 35% in Q4 2009. Wall Street analysts kept reassuring investors, Nokia is fine. They're still the biggest. They're adapting. They weren't adapting. They were dying in slow motion. September 2010, Nokia's board makes a desperate decision. They replace their Finnish CEO with Stephen Elop, a Canadian executive who had just come from Microsoft. Nokia, the pride of Finland, now had an outsider at the helm. Someone who'd spent 0 years in the mobile phone business. Red flags everywhere. But Nokia was panicking. Elop's first major move? In February 2011, he sends a memo to all Nokia employees that becomes known as the Burning Platform. Memo: we are standing on a burning platform, Elop writes, and we must decide how we are going to change our behavior. The memo leaked publicly, instantly. It was meant to rally the troops. Instead, it destroyed morale and terrified customers. Elop had basically announced to the world, our products are failures. Don't buy them. Nokia's smartphone sales immediately cratered. Why would anyone buy a Nokia when the CEO just said they're standing on a burning platform? But then Elop made his second move, the one that would seal Nokia's fate. He announced Nokia would abandon Symbian and partner exclusively with Microsoft, adopting Windows Phone as their primary smartphone platform, not Android, not developing their own new platform. Windows Phone, a platform that had 3% market share, a platform nobody wanted, a platform even Microsoft couldn't get people to use. Industry experts were shocked. Developers were confused. Customers felt betrayed. Many suspected Elop was a Trojan horse, that Microsoft had planted him at Nokia specifically to destroy the company from within and then acquire them cheap. Whether that conspiracy is true or not, the result was the same. Nokia's smartphone market share went into freefall. The Windows Phone partnership was an unmitigated disaster. Developers didn't want to build apps for Windows Phone. Consumers didn't want to buy Windows phones. Carriers didn't want to stock them. Nokia's market share collapsed. In the third quarter of 2007, it was 48.7%. By the fourth quarter of 2010, it had fallen to 33%. In the fourth quarter of 2011, it dropped further to 12%. And by the second quarter of 2013, it was just 3.1%, from 50% to 3% in just 6 years. Nokia's stock price disintegrated. The company that had been worth over $150 billion was now valued at a fraction of that. Employees were being laid off by the thousands. The pride of Finland was crumbling. In September 2013, Microsoft announced they would acquire Nokia's entire devices and services business for $7.2 billion. Let that sink in. Nokia, which had sold 435 million phones in 2007 alone, was being sold for just $7.2 billion. Stephen Elop stood at the press conference announcing the sale. At the end of his speech, he said something that broke hearts across Finland. We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. Except they did do things wrong. Lots of things. They were arrogant. They dismissed the iPhone. They clung to Symbian far too long. They chose Windows Phone over Android. They hired a CEO from Microsoft who drove them straight into Microsoft's arms. Here's the truly brutal part. Microsoft's acquisition of Nokia was one of the worst tech acquisitions in history. Microsoft tried to make Windows Phone work. They invested billions more. They rebranded Nokia phones as Microsoft Lumia. Nothing worked. In 2015, just 2 years after the acquisition, Microsoft announced a $7.6 billion write-down on the Nokia purchase. They basically admitted they'd flushed the entire acquisition price down the toilet. By 2017, Microsoft completely abandoned the mobile phone business. Nokia's mobile division, once worth over $100 billion, had been sold for $7.2 billion, and then written off as worthless just 2 years later. Meanwhile, the smartphone market exploded. Apple and Samsung now dominate, sharing nearly 40% of global sales between them. Chinese manufacturers like Xiaomi, Oppo, and Huawei captured massive market share. Nokia could have been any of them. They were positioned better than any company to dominate smartphones. Instead, they're irrelevant. Nokia's collapse teaches us something terrifying. Market dominance means nothing if you can't adapt. Nokia had everything: the biggest market share, the best brand recognition, the most loyal customers, manufacturing expertise, distribution channels, financial resources, and they lost it all in 6 years. They didn't lose to better technology, they lost to better vision. Apple saw that phones could be pocket computers. Google saw that an open operating system could dominate. Nokia saw that physical keyboards were important. Nokia's biggest failure wasn't technical, it was psychological. They couldn't imagine that their dominance could end. They couldn't imagine that the rules could change. When you're on top, you have two choices: keep innovating and risk cannibalizing yourself, or protect your current business and get disrupted by someone else. Nokia chose to protect. Apple chose to disrupt. That choice made all the difference. Today, Nokia still exists. They pivoted back to telecommunications infrastructure. They licensed their brand to HMD Global for Nokia-branded Android phones that nobody buys. But the Nokia that dominated the world, that Nokia is gone forever. We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. Yes, you did do something wrong. You stopped imagining that you could lose. And in business, the moment you stop imagining you can lose is the moment you've already lost. Speaking of catastrophically bad decisions, if you think Nokia's story was brutal, wait till you hear about Yahoo. They rejected Google for $1 million, fumbled Facebook, refused Microsoft's $44 billion offer, then sold for scraps. Nokia made mistakes. Yahoo made history's worst business decisions. Click here to watch Yahoo, the $128 billion empire that could have owned Google. Trust me, you need to see this train wreck. I'll see you there.